We are so thankful to our God for the gift of health, even for the gift of your Son, Jesus Christ, through whom alone we have life this evening. We ask that in this short session you will speak to us, through me and to me especially, in Jesus' name. Amen. Now, I'll be switching slides, and they are basically just meant for studying together. They are quite elementary. They are just for the sake of study. Now, yesterday we learned about the gift of health, and we didn't go much into the principles of health, but we labored to understand that the matters of our health concern not just our physical, but equally our mental and our spiritual. If that is what you understood from yesterday's health talk, let me see your hands. Okay, only one person understood. Let me repeat it. I'm saying yesterday my main burden was to remind us that the message of health has more than just physical consequences. God has given it because He desires that we will develop not just in the body and live long, but equally in our minds and in our spirit. I've repeated the question. Now, if that is how you understood yesterday, kindly raise up your hand. The numbers are better. If that is not what you understood yesterday, that was simply the point. Now, today, I want us to look at immune health. But before, actually, this is not the next slide. I want to use it, guys. Back and forth. Yes, I believe this is a better place to start. Now, before we understand what healing is, I think we ought to understand what disease is. I think yesterday I said we will try and understand what is the true cause of disease. Now, before we go so far, the World Health Organization has a quite interesting definition of disease. It's not, well, the entirety of it, but they say that disease is the absence of mental and physical well-being of the body. Now, there's one aspect that is left out, which is that, and we expect that they will not be so concerned about their spiritual, but really, there's quite an interesting definition that we find in God's word. You know, by the way, before we look at what we have in the spirit of prophecy, any one of us, what do you think disease is? Yes, my sister. And thank you for smiling. Yes, what's disease? It's just a discussion. Thank God we have so much time that we have 12 hours of time. She says it's nature's effort to relieve itself from harmful things. Let's say things. Well, that's really close to what we are about to read. Anyone who has a different idea of disease?
From the book, Ministry of Healing?
No. I just want to layman. We are getting there, don't you worry. Thank God, everyone is giving me MH 127. And that's so good to know, yes?
It is the ability of the body not having things to perform its normal function.
Yeah, it's when the body is not able to perform its normal functions. That's how we know disease. But anyway, let me just take with us what we were so much burdened to share before we go so far. We are told that disease is an effort of nature. Now, not if you're saying about your body. Now, before we read the next statement, that's the end of the definition for disease. Disease is simply your body trying to reset. It creates conditions that simply tell you there's a law you're not living up to. There's a law you are violating. So disease is a disease enemy or a friend. Well, I'm not saying you should get sick, but is disease a friend or an enemy? If you look at it, disease is simply a body language. It's simply telling you need to slow down, you need to sleep better, you need to adjust your diet, you need to work less or more, and such things. So disease really is simply an index of the conditions that are in our body which have resulted from a violation of the laws of health. Now those laws, we will shortly go through each of them, but let me just finish the quotation, though that's going to come a little later in our study tonight. It says, in case of sickness, what should be done? We're just reading from the whole. In case of sickness, the cause should be ascertained. Find out what's the cause of this condition. And then, secondly, unhealthful conditions should be changed, and wrong habits should be done corrected, and then help your body in her efforts to do what? To expel impurities and to reestablish right conditions in the system. How do you help your body? We will look at that as we continue. But basically, I was most interested in understanding what disease is.
It's simply your body reacting to the conditions which have been created therein because you violated a certain law of your own being. Now notice, the laws of health are not just book knowledge. Oh, sorry. I'm really giving this young man a hard time following me around with the camera. Let me try and stand still. I'm feeling quite free. Bear with me. But, what was I saying? Oh, let me just take it up again. So we are going to see how these laws, when they are violated, and the condition that that come into a system, which we call disease. Now, science agrees. By the way, yesterday I said there are 4 things that we refer to as our teachers of health. And number 1 is what? The Bible. And second, science, true science. Third is history. And the 4th, common sense. Those are the 4 educators of man as regards to health. Did you know there's so much we would know from common sense as well? And that's why, which I don't call common sense really, that's what the world calls it, but God gives us a conscience. Romans 1:20 says, no one is without excuse for not knowing God, because even things we cannot see, he has explained through things we can see. Are we together? Now, when we violate the laws of health, science, which may not be so, maybe they may not use the terms we are used to as the laws of health, but science quite agrees in 4 things that cause disease. And number 1 in their list is acidity. Most diseases, or rather conditions, because not everything is a disease. Remember, there are infectious diseases and others which are simply conditions of the body, like what we call lifestyle diseases. They are not caused by some parasite or like malaria, for example, but rather from lifestyle. Now, how does acidity bring about disease? In this way, your body, God has created our body in such a particular way, such that the pH of your cell is about 6.5, and the pH of your blood is between 7.35 to 7.4, which is slightly alkaline, and your cells are slightly acidic. Now, the body will always strive to maintain that level of acidity, or what should I call it? Okay, that pH. For example, your blood, we have 2 organs. We have your respiratory system, and we also have the kidney and also the liver. These are organs that the body uses to make sure that at all times your body's pH is maintained for the cell at 6.5 and for the blood at a roughly 7.4. Let me give an example. When you go for exercise and you run so much, what is coming in great volumes? You're taking in so much oxygen. And oxygen is naturally alkalizing in nature. So when you over-exercise, maybe you're going up a hill, what will your kidney do? Rather, what will your respiratory system do? As you exhale your carbon dioxide, the body will always try to make use of just the amount of oxygen that you need, even if you're not doing exercise. Why? Because the body is avoiding a circumstance where your blood is over-alkalized. What would happen if your body becomes over-alkalized? Rather, your blood. Your brain swells and you get into a coma. The kidneys as well, through filtering, will always try to make sure that your blood retains a certain pH. Now, when your body becomes overly acidic, it becomes a proper breeding ground for what we call disease-causing organisms. There's a guy called Louis Pasteur, if I'm pronouncing his name well. He became so popular for this common belief that what causes disease? Germs. Are we together? Have you ever heard that germs cause disease? How many of us think that germs cause disease? Don't fear raising up your hand just because I'm insinuating that they don't. But if you truly believe germs cause disease, maybe there's something more to look at. Now notice, they actually do. But to a great extent, what makes you fall sick is really not the presence of the germ, but the condition which you have created in your what? In your system. Do we have germs in our bodies today and we are not sick? In fact, we have so many types of different disease-causing organisms, let me call them so, living in our being. Why are they there? What's the role of the germ? Or rather, what's the role of any bacterium virus really? Let's talk about bacteria. What's their role in our body? Anyone who thinks they know? Now, when God created man, he designed that man would live eternally. How would he ensure that that happens? In the Garden of Eden, there was a tree. One for the knowledge of good and evil, which they were strictly told not to eat. But apart from that, there was another tree, which is the tree of life. As they ate of that tree, they continued to live. But now when man sins, something happens. Man must what? Die, and not just die, but go back where? To the ground where from he was taken. Now that's the work of this bacterium we live in our hearts. They are what we call decomposers. They bring back a dead organism back to, it's the ecological system. God cleans it. It's in every fruit. Did you know that, maybe you've ever had a mango, and it's just fallen from the tree, and you realize it's rotten. One man did a very interesting experiment. I can't remember his name, but he took a cat, and then he tied that cat in a vacuum. Let me say an airtight container. You know what happened? That cat died. So many, months later, he wanted to see what really happens to this cat, because it's in an airtight, making sure that nothing is going into that thing. Did you know what he found out later? He simply found dust. And he looked at that dust under a microscope and realized that that dust was quite alive and had so much life in it. Of course, it's dead. The cat is dead. It's decomposed to mold dust, which is the very last in that order of decomposition. But he realized that they were still what? Living organisms. These things are in us. That's why mangoes fall, they rot, and it's still in the tree, because it's in them, and it's also in man. We have so many bacterium living with us. Now notice, not every bacteria is evil. We have good bacteria and bad bacteria. All of us have bacteria living in our system. What now unbalances your system is when the bad bacteria, in layman language, overcome the what? The good bacteria. Let me give an example of something that is so important, which so many people are using today to discredit the vegetarian diet, and that's the B12 issue. You've ever heard about it? Yes? They say, oh, if you are vegetarian, you really need to take B12 supplements. Otherwise, you'll suffer from B12 deficiency, and I don't know what will happen. Your red blood cells become bigger than normal, and all those cases. But did you know that however much B12 you have, even if it's from your flesh diet, it cannot be utilized unless it is made available to your body by being broken down by the lactobacillus bacteria in your system. So we need bacteria. It helps actually in the assimilation of certain vitamins, including B12. And again, bacteria, in case I'm not able to find it even from plant sources, notice B12 is available. The bacterium that I have in my system are able to produce it in my own. As I go to sleep, I cannot totally clean my teeth. We still have bacteria which synthesize it from whatever foods we eat and from other intrinsic factors, and they make it available to the body. So we need bacterium. They are not the enemy. Who creates the enmity? It is us, by creating an environment wherein they thrive. Let me give an example of a cancer cell. Now, a cancer cell is not normal because it breaks almost all the rules of normal cells. Some of the rules of a normal cell is that as cells split and grow, the moment they come into contact with another cell, which is also normal growing, naturally they stop to grow. But that is not observed by a cancer cell. It grows into the next cell and over and beyond. Now, normal cells have blood vessels supplying them. But a cancer cell is able to begin new blood vessels to supply it. It's called angiogenesis. It's a very weird cell. It's quite like sin. Yeah? And another thing about a cancer cell is that instead of burning glucose in the presence of oxygen to provide units of ATP. What do we use ATP for? Energy. So, ATP is simply energy. A normal cell is supplied by the food we eat. If it's a carbohydrate, it will be broken down to what? To glucose, and then that glucose to energy. And if it's in excess, what happens to excess glucose? The body stores it as glycogen, which is a reserve of energy, which it will later reconvert to what? To glucose when you have not eaten. And excess, of course, is stored as fat cells. Yeah? Yeah, but you see, that's a normal cell. But what happens in the case of cancer cells, they don't burn down glucose in the presence of oxygen. What they do is they ferment glucose in the absence of oxygen. And what is the product? More acid, lactic acid, and that's why it's painful. Cancer is so painful, sometimes even the strongest painkiller does not really help. Because it creates lots of acidic, it actually breaks down, or not breaks down rather, it ferments glucose in the absence of oxygen, and in that way it produces much more acidity. So if my body is at the right pH, that makes it uncomfortable for disease-causing organisms to thrive. Are we together? So who really causes disease? Is it my choices which lead to acidity or the germ? It's the germ. So science will simply tell you it's acidity, but they won't tell you how you actually become over acidic. We'll get to that shortly as we talk about the laws of health. Now, science will also tell you that the second cause of disease is toxicity. The body has 7 elimination channels through which it always struggles to take away things that should not be in the body. Now, notice, I'm not saying everything we eat brings in toxicity. Even the processes of producing energy in our body leave off certain byproducts. Are we together? which are not entirely safe for the body. But God, in His mercy, has made provision for the wastes that our metabolism processes create to come out. We have the respiratory system, we have the we have the skin, we have the colon, and we have the kidneys, and we also have remind me, I'm forgetting some of them. The 7 elimination channels. Okay, they are not common, eh? Yeah, but through your skin, that is through sweat, through your kidney, that's through urea, through your colon, which brings up long waste, eh? Or rather what we call long call. And then we have through your respiratory system, we breathe out CO2. Those are methods, or rather avenues, through which God has created to bring off waste. But notice, if the rate of waste incoming is greater than the waste outgoing, the body remains with a great load to deal with. Now, what are some of the things that bring in waste into our systems? The greatest contributor is through what? What we eat. Refined stuff, processed foods that have lots of preservatives and chemical preservatives. I'm not saying all preservatives are wrong. Lemon is a good example of a preservative. Is it evil? No. So preservatives, chemicals which we apply on our skin or our sprays, or simply the environment in which we live, plastics. We use plastic. This is an example of things that really bring in so many waste into our system. But God, through our system, will always try to bring them out. But if it's not able to bring them out efficiently, we have remains of that. Maybe because I'm not drinking enough water. Because even the kidney, for it to work and effectively chuja your blood, it needs supply of water. Are we together? So if I'm not doing all those things, my body becomes toxic. And the same way you see disease-causing things dwelling in filthy grounds, the same thing happens in your body. Your body becomes a feeding ground for the bad bacteria. You're starving the good bacteria and feeding the what? The bad bacteria. And so I become susceptible to disease. So that's another thing you realize, it's all a matter of choice. It's not chance. Now another thing that science says causes disease is an accident. Now we have many kinds of accidents. We also have biohazards that happen. We are, for example, if you've ever read about Hiroshima, you know Hiroshima? What happened in Hiroshima? Bomb blast. Well, there was nuclear explosion. And to date, they are still reaping the results because so many kids are still being born with either physical or mental. Now, such cases, we would say it's a pure accident. But there are other accidents which we actually bring upon ourselves. For example, let me use an example of a mother who is taking alcohol or smoking. And they give birth to a baby who has low birth weight, a very small brain, they don't develop quite quickly, who are ever and almost always sick. I would say that's an accident, but it's really not an accident. It's just a result of intemperance. So I would say accidents contribute to a very small percentage of disease. Let me not talk too much about it. Then there's the genetics part, and which comes in this way. You know, you've ever heard of people who say, this thing is in our blood. My dad had certain disease and my grandfather too, so I'm in that line. And they excuse disease because they think they really had to get it. But, of course, it contributes in this way. Every child is a product of a mother and father, and they bear not just their spiritual, which is important, but also their physical. For any baby to form as a cytoblast and as it grows to a full child, it starts from how many chromosomes from the mother? 23 and the implantation happens and conception and then all through pregnancy. And as that baby is born, it is born not just with weaknesses, but also tendencies. Are you together? Now, weaknesses that are passed, I would say every generation is weaker than the preceding one. Are we in agreement? Our mental, physical and spiritual capacities have been lessening from one generation to another. But there's another aspect which is so important that lies behind genetics. It's the inheritance of tendencies and habits. Let me say this. Many people will get what their dad and mom had, not because they simply had it, but because they inherited the same habits that brought them disease. Are we together? Good example is the habit of cooking. Many daughters today cook how they do, cook the way they do because their mothers used to do that. Am I wrong? You know, just the other day we were arguing with my husband on how to make chapati. Because he makes really tough chapati. You chew one and you want to go and sleep first. But sadly, thank God he's not here, his method of cooking is simply how they used to do it in their home. And every other part. And no one has a problem with that. I'm the only one who has a problem with tough chapati. But on the other hand, I have a method which I just acknowledged that day that it's simply how my mother used to do it. And maybe with a little improvements because of light, which she may not have had. Something I see on TV, in advertisement of oils. How many used to see the advert here, Kimbo? There was an advert by Kimbo that suggests that one daughter wants to find out why their grandfather loves their, you know, the way it's passed down, and then the mother wants to go and show the girl the secret, and then anamfungulia Kimbo. You know? And then that mother passes it to their daughter, why everyone liked my food, or why you found my food was so interesting, is this. And then he shows her Kimbo. So that daughter will use Kimbo and pass it down to their. Those are healthful practices that are passed. That's why the greatest danger with genetics is really not the weak body we have naturally inherited, but rather the fact that when you are born with tendencies of doing what your parents would do. And that's why God was so particular as it came to the birth of Samson, for example. Which other Nazarite do you know? Manoah's child and John the Baptist. God is particular to the parents. Don't do this, don't do that. Why? Because he knows those are the same things you pass down to your what? To your children. If I'm hot-tempered, I am very likely to pass that tendency of hot-temperedness to my who? To my child. And so genetics truly play a role, but in that I love to look at it from that light. Because we always, there's a statement that says, lifestyle loads the gun. No, heredity loads the gun, but your lifestyle will do what? They will pull the trigger. If I realize that my lineage from my great-grandfather has been suffering from cancer, and I realize that I'm in that lineage, I think I will take more caution, realizing that I could change things. See what is it that they would used to do that actually led them to what they were doing. And that's why in case of disease, we were not to utilize. You know, today, the conventional medicine utilizes just two methods of healing. One is chemical and radiation, that is drugging. And second is surgery, cutting away. It's your liver which is the problem. Come, remove one. Okay, you can't really remove your liver. But an example is my tooth. I'm having a small hole with my tooth, and I go to the dentist, and will they tell you, you can try out cloves? Or will they tell you, they schedule you for, you remove your tooth. Okay, they fill it with, most cases, aluminum filings, which are more dangerous to your brain. And so you're treating a tooth, you end up with fits, epilepsy, Alzheimer's disease, and it goes escalating. Don't get me wrong, there are better ways of doing things. That's why in the case of disease, we were told, what should we do? Change unhealthful conditions. If it's a stuffy room you're living in, that's an unhealthy condition. One time we went to a mission in Kitui. We found one grandmother who had a bad headache. She had really bad migraine, and we visited her. And we entered her room, and I was so scared that anyone could live in such a room. You see, people who create lines for hanging clothes which didn't really dry. You hang there your wet clothes and used clothes and new clothes and every other cloth, and you're using a stove and the window is never open, and she sleeps there with very dirty blankets. What do you expect? So in such a case, would I just give that, even if it's a natural remedy, would it be effective in her conditions? No. That's why we are taught to change and healthful conditions, like improving sanitation, improving circulation, and such. Another thing, correcting wrong habits. Habits of eating late, habits of sleeping late, habits of overworking, habits of indulging appetite. Now that's a big word, but indulging appetite is simply being intemperate. And temperance is doing is taking judiciously what you know is beneficial and totally being able to say no. It's self-control, I would say. And it's so sad because the Bible says a man who cannot control himself is like a city without a wall. A wall, anything is able to come in. Now we look at that more. And the last thing, the last principle of dealing with disease, we are told, is to assist nature to expel impurities. How do we expel impurities from our system? Assist your body. Of course, the body has systems put in place for expelling impurities, like the 7 elimination channels I just mentioned. How do we assist? Making sure the body has everything it needs. Enough water. Bathing. That really helps the body, because you can drink so much water, but you never take a shower. Your skin is really struggling. And 2SM says the habit of recycling clothes. You've taken a really nice warm shower, and then you go back into your same clothes you had. Young men. Yeah? The 2SM says your body has an ability to reabsorb back the toxins it had expelled, and when they come out the second time, they are more toxic than when it was expelled the first time. So be in the habit of cleaning your skin and your clothes, anything that comes into contact with your skin. Detox programs, either through juicing. It doesn't have to be juicing. It could be a vegetable salad fast. I think I'll explain those a little more. Hydrotherapy, cleansing, detoxing, that is either through juicing or fasts. One simple way I find of cleansing the body is simply going on a 3-day melon fast. It's so powerful that for some people who had a disease hiding in their system, in most cases after the 3 days they have a rash on their skin or a big boil or pimple. Don't be scared. You'd rather have a rash and a small pimple. It simply means your body is really struggling to throw off what it has been accumulating. Juicing with either vegetable or fruits. I gave an example of a melon fast. You don't really need to blend melons. I meant melons. Another cleanse would be the lemon fast. As sister explained, one way of doing it. Just a 3-day lemon juice fast. Now this is how you do it. You don't, well, there are 2 ways of doing it really. You may want to do a 3-day lemon fast with just 3 lemons blended in 1 liter of water. 3 whole lemon. You don't peel. You simply wash well and make sure it's clean. You may soak it in a little vinegar water and then thoroughly rinse, or soak in charcoal or in salt water. That will make sure you are killing off all the germs that are in the surface. Then blend 3 lemons in 1 liter of water. It's quite bitter, but you take that in the morning, 1 cup. 1 liter is 3 cups. Morning, lunch, and evening. You don't do that for so long because it has a tendency to really dry your skin. But that's a nice cleanse and alkalizing at the same time. Another way of doing it is a 10-day lemon fast. Notice you can still do with meals. The 10-day lemon fast, you have 60 lemons, which you will utilize in this way. First day, you have 2 liters of water, clean drinking water. Then squeeze in 2 lemons and drink that water. until it's done. The second day, you squeeze in 4. I'm sure you are aware of this method, yeah? You squeeze in 4 lemons in the same 2 liters. Then day 3, you squeeze in 6 lemons in 2 liters and drink that until it's done. Day 4, 8. Day 5, 10. Day 6, 10. Day 7, 8. Day 6. Okay. Did I lose my... You go up to 10. Day 1 is 2. Day 2 is 4. Day 3 is 6. Day 4 is 8. Day 5 is 10. And day 6 is 10. And day 7 is 8. And day 8 is 6. And day 9 is 4. And day 10 is 2 again. In 2 liters of water, and simply drink that. Then don't do it repeated, like finishing 10 days and start another 10 days. Give yourself like a month. And then redo it. That's a really nice way of alkalizing, just making sure you're toning down acidity and you're also cleansing your system. Those are methods of juicing. The other way is simply juicing vegetables, which we take. And a good idea is not mixing more than 4. If we were to give combinations of juices, we would have an endless list. But you may want to do a beetroot carrot juice, maybe a spinach and carrot, amaranth and beetroot, cabbage, carrot and onions, cabbage, carrot and tomato. It's an art. You can play around your vegetables. The only thing is you don't mix vegetables and the fruits in the same combination. I see many people talk about the carrot and apple. If my reading serves me well, I doubt it would be a really nice idea. But you can play around with different vegetables. People do these things, but another problem is someone would take 1 glass in the morning and then go all day. And they are doing cleansing. That's really not true deep tissue cleanse. If you are doing a juice fast, you need up to 5. Actually say at least 5 times. 5 glasses, that is. At least, and then try changing it. Yeah? If you have to eat during a juice fast, you can do pure brown rice. You just boil brown rice. Don't pamper it with ghee oil and water and just eat that. That's a nice way. Another thing that can be filling is an oat. You know oats? Just make a simple oat uji and take that alongside your fast. They don't have to be really long. Anything from 3 days, your body appreciates. If you're strong enough, you could go. In fact, for some treatments, you recommend a fast of up to 21 days. And before you need your herbs, the person is actually doing well. That's another way of expelling impurities and to help your body reestablish right condition. Then we have hydrotherapy, which I mentioned, bathing. Other methods that help the body exhale impurities are things like steam baths and and hot foot baths and tub baths and body scrubs. One thing that I read one time and tried out is the salt rub. Just get normal table salt and your bathing water. Wet it and scrub your entire system with salt. And then at about 15 minutes, rinse it thoroughly. You feel so nice. It opens pores. It helps the body breathe, let me use the word breathe off. Take off impurities. This is a hydrotherapy. If you can't do it with salt, you can actually do it with baking soda as well, or sand. If you have a chance of visiting the coast, don't just go and swim. Do yourself a nice rub and open your pores. Rub yourself with sea salt, with sea sand. It's not salt, what you find at the beach, really. But scrub yourself. Those are ways that you help the body, not just to remove impurities, but also to improve circulation. Because healing depends so much upon circulation. Why? Because the immune system, which we will shortly go into, but what time is it, by the way? Before we go further than we ought to. Mine is not so accurate. It's saying it's 7:42. That means I have 18 minutes. Yes? Yeah. But those are methods of helping the body. Now, healing principles. Sorry if this is a little sketchy. trying to do everything I was thinking of in a little short time. But one important thing, if you want to bring about health, is to learn to work with what? Nature. Don't try to do for the body what it ought to do for itself, but rather give back your body power to do for itself what it's supposed to do. This is a good example of what synthetic insulin does. What's the work of insulin in the body? To bring glucose to the what? To the cells, ndio? Because you may eat so well, but all that glucose is clamped up in your system and it's not being brought. And it's not even the one that takes it in. Inside the cell membrane, which is semi-permeable, there are receptors, something we call a receptor, yeah? Wherein insulin brings in, and then the receptor accepts the glucose into the cell. That way, it's not flooded. Now, where do we get insulin from the body? It's produced in your pancreas by beta cells. Now, if someone has diabetes type 1, it means their systems are not able to do what? To produce insulin. So they are eating, there's glucose, yes, but there's nothing to take it to the system. Now, out there, what do we do with such a patient? They take in synthetic insulin, which will do the work that their insulin, which the body should have produced, is doing. Now, what is true treatment? And I'm not saying go and take someone who is diabetic off from their insulin today. But what is a true treatment? Is it supplying the body with insulin, or it is giving back the pancreas power to produce insulin? Even if it's natural, because there are many plants which actually act like insulin. And one of them is the amla fruit. We have another which is turmeric. When it's mixed with fenugreek, they really help the body manage sugar. But is that permanent solution? Really not. Are we together? Are you getting me? So we need to work with nature, not for nature. If I have, okay, that's an example I was giving, but many times someone has a problem, we want to give them a drug that will sort out that problem. And we love it because they are fast. Okay, not fast. They are taskless. You know? How much effort does it take you to take a pill? But as in a tablet, and you swallow, some even without water. But if we were to work with nature, sometimes it's slow, but it's the best way. Sometimes it will take you so much effort, and in fact, you are told many people are not. In fact, I think that's what is there. It says the use of natural remedies require an amount of care and effort that many are not what? Willing to give. Nature's process of healing and upbuilding is gradual, and to the impatient, it seems slow. The surrender of hurtful indulgences requires sacrifice. But in the end, it will be found that nature, untrammeled, when you don't stand in its way, what happens? It does her work wisely and well. That's one principle we need to utilize as we help people. Then another important principle is to prevent. That's why we are learning all these laws of health. By the way, I said we were going to go through them. Okay. Preventing is better than cure. Sometimes when you want to compromise, you usually tell yourself, let me just eat this thing and then I'll drink charcoal. Those of us who have been enlightened to know what charcoal does. So you decide it's a party, you don't want to look weird, so you will just cooperate with everyone else, eat quickly, and then go home and cleanse. That is not in the spirit of Christ. Rather, we ought to prevent. What we can prevent, we ought to. Now, the laws of nature are well calculated to prevent us from getting disease. But in the case we do, these very laws are also able to do what? To assist us to restore. Because God has said there's an antidote for every malady, it should not be a ticket for indulging so that I get sick and deal with it. It's just, I read some, was it a paper that said conventional medicine admits that they have no way of treating cancer. And many more people today are turning to alternative medicine. Notice, alternative medicine is not just health reform. or rather medical missionary work. Others, there is the Chinese. You've ever heard of Chinese medicine? And Indian, it's called Ayurvedic. The Indians do so well, by the way. They know so much about herbs and methods. But look at their lifestyle, their food. They don't use water anywhere. Their food is so oily and so spicy. But actually, they also know how to treat their issues. Did you know that the leading country in diabetes is China? 50% of China is diabetic. But they seem to have alternative medicine. Anyway, there's the acupuncture. You've never seen all those things that they puncture you with pins in certain place to deal with pain. There are methods, yes, and I'm not I won't say they don't work. One time I met some medical missionary who was advising me to use urine therapy. How many have ever heard of urine therapy? It's an Indian thing. And he has used this on patients and they are well. But think about it, really. The moment you even tell anyone you want to use their urine, you've already lost their confidence, I imagine. But actually, Indians use it, and they are having a little, I don't know what protein they get from that thing, but what I'm saying is that it's not God's method. Because God's method works with nature. What's the natural use of urine? Is it for medicine? It's excretory. It's our body's response to do what? To cleanse. Imagine taking it back. Well, it's dirty. Let's stop it there. Let's not even talk about it much. Diet. The diet, for example, is responsible for most diseases. MH 127 paragraph 2 says, pure air, sunlight, abstemiousness, rest. Abstemiousness is temperance. Kujizuilia. Exercise, proper diet, the use of water, and trust in divine power. These are the what? These are the what? Why are they saying true? It's because there are others, like the one I mentioned. But these are the true remedies. Every person should have a knowledge of nature's remedial agencies and how to do what? To apply them. Do you know it's possible to know a certain tree helps, but never you know how to use it? Because I realize there are some trees, for example, whose bark is useful, but their roots are poisonous. I believe I think it's because we don't know how to prepare. For example, how do we use roots as herbs? You decoct, you boil, literally boiling. But how do we use leaves? For mfano, you only need to infuse. To infuse is you put in hot water, let it steep for about 15 minutes, and then you strain that and drink. But if you did that with roots, hard roots, you would hardly benefit. So it's about also not just knowing, but also how to apply them. It is essential both to understand the principles involved in the treatment of the sick and to have a practical training that will enable one rightly use this knowledge. This is what I was referring to in the morning, by the way. It's important not just to know, but to do what? Obtain a what? Where am I? Oh, it's important to do what? To understand the principles involved in treatment. To square watu wakwambia watu, just use, it's okay, your faith will heal you. Of course, in many cases, their faith will, but God desires that we will understand the principles and also obtain a what? A practical training. If UOE decides we are organizing 1 week for training, you know how many people would show up? A few, senior. But how many will go home saying, we were trained? Many, because it was in their school and they didn't even attend. That's sad. We need to know these things for what they are. Again, we are told another important thing when it comes to healing is a good mental state. You may have the right herbs and everything, but if your mental state is bent on dying, you will actually die. And I would encourage you to go and read a chapter in the book Ministry of Healing, which is called Mind Cure. She says in that book that many people are in their graves today who should not be there. They suffered from diseases that were wholly imaginary. It used to happen to me when I was young, by the way. We had a grandmother who was a doctor. When she describes a certain condition, I actually feel like that. It's actually a medical condition as well. That's why it's not so good to Google things. You feel you're itchy at the part of your breast, and then you go to Google and type in itchy breasts. And you go out of that Google lesson believing that you have breast cancer. Just because, and your body, your brain starts creating. They say the symptoms were lack of sleep. I didn't even sleep well tonight. Lack of appetite. Oh, that's why I didn't eat so well in the morning. You feed yourself until finally you're really sick. You're told the mind must control the body, which also needs to be under the control of who? Not just the mind controlling. Now notice, the condition of the mind affects the health to a far degree than many realize. Many of the diseases from which men suffer are a result of mental depression, grief, anxiety, discontent, remorse, guilt, distrust. All these tend to break down the life forces and to invite decay and death. Another thing, disease is sometimes produced and often greatly aggravated by the imagination. Many are lifelong invalids who might be well if they only thought so. Many people would be well if they thought they were well, but they are not. Many imagine that every slight exposure will cause illness, and the evil effect is produced because it is expected. Did you know that you could die from the thought of death? I wish I knew all the science behind this. But if you thought long enough that you would die, you would actually die. One lady conceived, but she was so scared that she was going to lose that baby that she actually did. Because the body creates the environment you are experiencing in your mind, and it actually happens. Maybe you are cold. You go to a place where everyone is suffering, and you keep telling yourself, I'm going to get a cold. I'm going to get a cold. And you actually do. The condition of the mind, it's so important to understand. And anytime you're dealing with someone, help them realize that they need a better mental state for them actually to... Oh, did I finish that? Where was that? Sorry. Many will... Where was I? Many imagine that every slight exposure will cause illness, and the evil effect is produced because it is what? Expected. Many die from disease, the cause of which is what? Oh, this is what I was saying. People are dying from things which are wholly imaginary. You start imagining you're having a heart attack. I remember one time I lost my dad, and it affected me so badly because I didn't grieve well. I was the man during that whole grieving process, but immediately after that, I got so sick. And I used to get something which I read or learned is simply an airlock, where there's an air bubble that is locked somewhere in between your respiratory system. But what you feel like you're going to get a heart attack. Okay, I've never had a heart attack. I don't think I know what it means, but you feel very funny, palpitations, and then I would run to the nearest clinic, get my pressure checked, everything is normal, but I'm feeling it. I'm feeling like I'm going to die. Until later, some old mama told me, when you feel that thing and you don't have pressure issues, go and take soda. It will stop. That time I tried, it got so bad one night, I sent my brother for soda. And I drank soda, and within 5 minutes, I burped. And it stopped. It stopped. And then I realized every time it would come, I don't take soda, but I force vomit. And the moment I do, it stops. But for so long, I believed I was going to get a heart attack because my dad had just died of a heart attack. And it was conditioned in my mind. I would actually feel the symptoms he used to complain with, jaw ache, all those things. I rush to hospital, I get my pressure tested, everything is okay. It's all up here. Until I learned that it's simply anxiety. And once I dealt with that, I remember I took counseling sessions in some Adventist hospital with some psychologists. She gave me 6 sessions. I only appeared for 2 because I was rushing for mission elsewhere. But after talking about it, imagine it stopped. Just talking. Some things are actually imaginary. Anyway, the condition of the mind, I think in treatment of the sick, the effect of mental influence should not be overlooked. Rightly used, this influence affords one of the most effective agencies for combating disease. I don't know how many slides are remaining. Yeah. Okay. It seems like there are more, and my time is done. But another important aspect is to trust in God, controlling the appetites. Never take up for yourself or for anyone on a cleansing or treatment program unless it is resolved in your heart that you actually want to change habits. There's nothing as bad as doing what we call +1 - 1 work. I'm really taking bitter herbs, but at the end of the day, I want my chicken still. How many have heard of the ketogenic diet or the keto diet? There's so much of it online, and well, it's an idea of subsisting wholly on protein. No carbs, zero carbs, well, zero exercise, zero other principle of health, but you don't take carbohydrate. You simply live off a little protein, and the body is actually subsisting much on digesting itself. It's the fastest way of losing weight. I have friends who tried it and they looked different in 2 weeks. Just a little, any protein, animal. In fact, one advert says you can lose your weight without losing the things you love. There's a way they put it that was so catchy. You can still eat your pork and chicken and still lose weight. Is that God's principle, really? It's not. God desires that we work with nature. The requirement of God must be brought home to the conscience. Men and women must be awakened to the duty of self-what? Mastery. The need of purity, freedom from every depraving appetite and defiling habit. They need to be impressed with the fact that all their powers of mind and body are the gifts of God and are to be preserved in the best possible condition for His service. So this is another principle of healing. You must give up wrong habits. We cannot expect to enjoy health and still keep our indulging. Of course, yesterday we saw that there are many other reasons which are spiritual, but even for the physical, avoid keeping habits that are not useful. Then trust in God. I think I'll talk much more about that tomorrow. And another important aspect of healing or health is a surrendered life. Allow me to just read this. When one surrenders to Christ, the mind is brought under the control of the law. But it is the royal law which proclaims liberty to every captive. By becoming one with Christ, man is made free. Subjection to the will of Christ means what? Okay, let's just read. Subjection to the will of Christ means what? Restoration to perfect manhood. These issues are interconnected, you realize. It's not just about how better I get my, how good I get my health choices, but rather we ought to surrender to Christ. And lastly, I believe is hope. The Bible says that anyone who is joined to the living, there's what? Hope. Never lose hope. It should be the last thing anyone loses if they have to. Because the Bible says, better is what? Hey, okay. It must be really late. You're tired, eh? For to him that is joined to the living, there is hope. For a living dog is better than what? A dead life. As long as you are living, there's hope. As long as you are alive today, whatever the condition it is you're going through, there is hope for such a person if they will cooperate with God. Now, I didn't get time to get into the immune health, which is what I believe we will do tomorrow, depending on where our health session will be. But we will still look at it. I hope we learned something. Anyone who learned something and wants to share with us what they learned? In one statement, in one sentence. Okay, so this whole thing was useless. Who wants to share with us what they learned or picked? One statement too. You see our time is done, so you only have 5 seconds. It should mean trouble. You are the one who was closest to me, and you've written so many notes, by the way. And they are so tiny, I believe they are meant for revision. You tell us, what did you pick from this talk?
God is good all the time.
Our health condition will determine all that will be here and in the life to come.
That was for today. Okay, Jalala, he was writing, so he didn't hear. He was writing. But anyway, he'll read. Yes. Then we pray.
God is good all the time. I've learned that we should not help we should not help nature or the body in restoring itself. Rather, we should not do for the body what it ought to do for itself. Rather, we should provide adequate provisions so that it exactly. Then another thing is that we have also learned that most of our diseases are from what we think or from our imaginations. When we think that we are sick, we will be sick. And when we think that we are well, we shall be well. Then the last of it all is that there is hope.
Thank you. You see, camp meeting is study time, yeah? And though it's a very short period, we can't really get quite practical, but I know we will still have so much more of that. We've been having and we will continue to have sessions. When these things happen in your school, please attend. Sometimes you don't know where you will make use of information until God makes you stumble upon a case. You never thought you had so much knowledge on dealing with arthritis, but no one in your family has it. And then finally, God leads you to some place, and through that avenue, you actually reach out to a soul. So learn as much as you can. Be intelligent. Obtain practical training if you can. Let no one tell you that God will use you the way you are. If God provides an opportunity, he expects better. Let's rise. No, let's kneel down and pray. We are so thankful, our God, for creating us in a fearful and wonderful way. And you just didn't leave us to guess on what to do, but through your servant, the Bible, science, history, we can know so much. Not just to help when we are sick, but even to prevent it. And it's my prayer tonight that you will give us opportunities to learn more, and you'll help us assimilate these principles into our very lives, that even as we teach them, it will be apparent that they work. Bless this night of rest. As we disperse to our places of rest, may you grant us peace. May you grant us good night rest. Refresh us so that we may be able to hear of you again. Even grant us that gift of life. We, in a special way, want to pray for our brother who was with us earlier today, who is suffering from kidney failure and cancer. And we want to call upon the powers of heaven to visit him in a special way, that virtue may flow through his system and he may recover. We thank you for the promise that we find in your word for healing, and we claim it in faith. Yet above all things, above everything that we desire, may your perfect will be done, and we believe that you have come that we may have life and have it more abundantly. Bless us to this end, we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.